Esther Mokwariola. From Rwanda to Kenya, the test of democratic process continues in parts of Africa following Africa's historic election with longtime President José Eduardo dos Santos not participating in what is the beginning of a new political era in the country. Deciding to step down on health grounds after nearly 4 decades in power, the outgoing president laid the groundwork for a hand-picked successor in an oil-rich country where economic challenges, corruption and human rights violations are immediate concerns. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the political development in Angola as the people elect a new political leader in the country? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We'd like to warn ahead that today's report was a bit of flashed photography, and Africa Today will continue after this timeout. Welcome on board.
International observers present during Angola's general election on Wednesday have praised the smooth running of the election process and have attributed the success to the work of the National Electoral Commission. Some 1,200 international observers oversaw the election, with 9.3 million Angolans eligible to cast their ballots at more than 12,000 polling stations across the nation during Wednesday's vote. The observers that spoke to the press were unanimous in recognizing the orderly manner in which voters went to the polling stations and recognized the civility of the voting process, hailing it as a sign of the strength of democracy in Angola. The outgoing head of state, José Eduardo dos Santos, headed to the polls to vote for a new president, as did his fellow countrymen in the capital, Luanda, on Wednesday.
He actually stepping down is actually good, but he's not just stepping down because he wants to. He said so in December 2016 that he's not going to contest for the elections, but there has been rumors or stories that because of his health challenges, which sounds very familiar to us, he's actually has to step down. Just a few months ago, he went to Spain to go and take medical treatment, or you can call it a medical vacation if you want, and he was there for quite a while, and he went there again. So he has some health challenges. That's why he's saying he's not going to keep on running because of the demands of the presidency.
It's Angola's 4th general election since its return to multi-party democracy in 1992, and Dos Santos decided to step down and not run in this year's election after 38 years in power in the country. Questions have been raised as to how much power Lourenco will have if he wins, given that veteran leader José Eduardo dos Santos, who is 74, who will continue to be the head of the ruling People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA, and have potentially a sweeping say over decision-making. His daughter Isabel heads national oil producer Sonangol, and his son José Filomeno is in charge of the State Investment Fund. The MPLA is expected to remain in power, but with a reduced majority. Its support has waned due to widespread political corruption, though many Angolans remain loyal to the party that emerged victorious from 27 years of civil war in 2002.
Well, more than 9 million Angolans cast their ballot in an election that marked the end of President José Eduardo dos Santos' 38 years in power and opened a new chapter in the nation's politics. João Lourenço, a strong ally of the incumbent leader, having served as defense minister and a former governor who fought in the war against the Portuguese colonial rule, as well as the long civil war that ended in 2002. Joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Nelson Ekujumi, an election and political analyst based in Nigeria. Good to have you here in the
Thank
studio.
you. Good evening. It's a pleasure.
And on Skype, I have Antonio Frank, lecturer, researcher, and doctorate candidate, African Studies Center, Leiden University in the Netherlands. Good to have you as well on the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, let me begin with you now, Nelson. This is indeed causing some reactions around in terms of Dos Santos, stepping down on health grounds. And, well, we have the MPLA leading, as it were. But what are your thoughts on the general developments in terms of politics in Angola, especially as the people elect a new leader?
Well, thank you very much. I think we have monitored developments in Angola, and I must report here this evening that, the developments have been the same story all over Africa, that the election was one in which the people had a choice between two leading candidates, the UNITA
And the
party
MPLA.
and the MPLA. And before I came into the studio, there was this report I saw, I monitored, which said that the ruling party MPLA had won the election by about 61.1%, while the UNITA was able to get about 26.7%, which was an improvement from the previous election where the MPLA, had a landslide victory. Now the UNITA had been able
opposition is able to make a difference.
A difference because the parliamentary seats that the UNITA had now had risen from 32 to 51, and the ruling party was able to get 150 out of the 220 parliamentary seats. So by and large, you can see that the election observers that monitored the election, that were physically on ground, have said the election went on smoothly, even though the opposition party has cried foul. But that attitude is in tandem with what we have always witnessed in most African countries, where opposition parties, when they lose, are always crying foul. One would expect that, if you have lost an election and you believe you have been, deprived of victory, the most legitimate thing to do is to approach the courts, which I believe is also part of the electoral system in Angola, like in every other African country.
All right, now, Frank, let's look at Eduardo dos Santos' leadership style. How would you evaluate it so far?
Well, he has been known, he has been known as a very quiet leader. I'm sure you guys know this as well. And if I would evaluate his style of leading, I would say he chose for, a leadership that is, let's say, pretty central. He centralized the power among his political party, and he knew how to keep the power actually close to him and his allies. And this was his actually style of leading, actually. I don't know if that's the answer you want me to. Because I do not really get your question precisely.
No, I got you. You're making some sense. Go ahead. We're listening.
Yeah, in terms of his leading style, it is a pretty centralized way of governing the country. The presidency and the president himself is the most powerful person institution in the country. And I have not much more to add on his style of leading, basically, because they're really personalized, actually.
Now, personalized in what sense in this case now? Because there have been some insinuations that even though the president, that's Dos Santos, didn't really contest, he still has a bit of a hold on power in Angola.
I see where you're coming from, because he will still involved in the party itself.
Indeed.
Meaning,
Yes.
he will not be in the government, but have the lead in the party itself, and having the lead in the party also have a say, because then the MPLA will be governing the country. So there will be his influence will remain. However, I had the discussion this morning with one of my colleagues, which they said, will Lorenzo, which will be the new president, actually be able to do something? Will have influence, because Dos Santos will remain actually on the sidelines in power. And my conclusion was, Lorenzo is a new person. I'm sure he has his own ideas and views, not his own vision. There will be a certain influence and change. I cannot say how much, of course, but there will be something. That's really something I also really believe in it. Of course, Dos Santos will still play a role, because I think the previous speaker said as well, his daughter and his son, for example, his daughter will also remain head of the Sonangol. His son will remain the head of the Sovereign Fund as well. So a lot of structure will remain the same, but I do believe Lorenzo also will have the capacity to also just put his own vision into practice.
All All right, let's go on a quick break. You're watching Africa Today, and we've been looking at political developments in Angola as the people elect a new political leader in the country. We've got more discussions after this. In an election where the ruling party is said to be in the lead, key opposition parties have complained on the uneven playing field as they are allegedly being deprived of media access. Now, there are also complaints of how voters in their strongholds were forced to cast their ballots at polling stations far from their homes in order to create apathy to the advantage of the ruling party. So Nelson, before we went on break, we were just listening to Frank's position on, Dos Santos's style of leadership, as well as, his hold, so to speak, on the governance of the country. Now, my concern, or to some others as well, is that wouldn't this have a little bit of an impact, so to speak, on the new president? Because that's Dos Santos, still controls or still has a bit of a power, kind of invisible. Well, so it might really clutch the hands of the president, don't you think?
That is stating the obvious, because you remember vividly well that the incoming president was the defense minister of the outgoing president, President Jose Eduardo Santos. And also, President Jose Eduardo Santos has been in power for 38 years. The clouds that would have established in almost almost 4 decades, will be very, very huge. Not only in Angola, but in the international community. So if any, and again, former President Jose Eduardo Santos is the leader of the party. So his hold on the party, as well as the government that is coming into office, will be very, very impactful. We'll only be deceiving ourselves or deluding ourselves if we want to assume that he won't have a control sort of on the party, because of his long stay in the political terrain of Angola. So it's an obvious fact that he will have a huge influence on this government. And don't be surprised, the government itself might have to be consulting him as a consultant on the day-to-day running of the country. Because
should that be the case here?
Well, if you need to tap into the experience of an experienced hand who has been there, who has faced who has gone through the furnace of leadership, of running a country, you need all hands, you need all advices, to steer the ship of that country. So going to President Eduardo Santos for consultation when they have problems, or for consultation on issues that they might not really be clear about, it won't be out of place, because whether we like it or not, it will be regarded as a former #1 citizen of the country.
All right, Frank, let's look at the country right now, which is being faced with some challenges in terms of corruption and other economic challenges as well. How do you think the country can move forward in this new dispensation?
Well, I think it's the same as advice to many countries that rely on 1 or 2 sources, 1 or 2 actually materials for the economy. The Angola now is really trying to diversify the economy because, as you probably know as well, it relies mostly on oil production and also diamonds. And seeing the oil decrease in price, and that actually causes a really financial problem in the country at the moment. Well, obviously the question is, will they succeed, and will this new administration succeed as well? Well, that's something, certain people, of course, doubt, because the same political party was not able to do this in the last 10 to 12 years. The question is whether they were able to do it. Also Lourenço in power.
So are you a bit pessimistic here that this party might not really do much in this new dispensation?
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, it will be difficult. It will be extremely difficult. Because even if Lourenço is willing to implement dramatic changes, you will still need to deal with the same people around within the party. And the question is, how powerful is he to implement reforms that actually, certain people within the party don't see as favorable to them.
Quite a salient point there raised by Frank. Nelson, do you share the same view or do you have an opposing one?
Well, I have an opposing view in the fact that I will expect that a new president will be visionary enough to realize that, look, the only way to get the economy of Angola running out of the woods, because Angola, just like Nigeria, is a major oil-producing country. But unfortunately, just like Nigeria, Angola imports everything under the sun. Angola is an import-driven economy. So it behoves on the new man who is coming into the saddle to realize that the only way to generate employment, because Angola is facing massive unemployment, the inflation rate is about 40%. You know, there's the issue of falling prices of crude oil, just like we are facing here in Nigeria. It behoves on them to now start looking inwards so that the little foreign exchange that they earn from oil can be used for developmental purposes rather than being used to bring imports finished products. So it is important for the new leader to realize that, look, the destiny of making Angola better is in their hands and not in foreign lands.
All right, let's look away from all that and let's look at the opposition. Let's go back to the opposition again one more time now, because the opposition rightly mentioned initially, you said that they are really gaining ground for them to have, have a little bit of a percentage in terms of, standing against the ruling party. So, but is it safe to say that, come some few years, in some few times to come, the opposition might take the new government instead of the ruling MPLA that has been there for nearly 4 decades?
Yes, it is not impossible. It's a possibility because of the fact that the opposition has been able to worm its way into the hearts of Angolans. And also, the poor economy of the country today also contributed in no small measure to the victory, to the penetration of the opposition into the political space. Don't forget, before now, the ruling party always had a landslide victory, but now the opposition is gaining ground. So it remains to see whether the ruling party will continue on its old path and the economy will suffer and people will be poorer. And if they told that path, the opposition party now has the responsibility to sell a manifesto that will endear them to the people of Angola. So it is not an impossibility that in the nearest future, if the ruling party continue on its old path and the opposition continue to research and look at new ways of making Angola better, the possibility of the people switching to the opposition and the opposition claiming emerging victorious at the polls is very, very there.
But in a situation where the MPLA has been there for long and people really know that party to be, it's, just like you have the ANC of South Africa and you have the ZANU-PF of Zimbabwe. So the MPLA of Angola might not really have, might really have its foothold, and so it might be difficult, so to speak, for an opposition to take over.
Yes, agreed is a tall order because of various sentiments. But don't also forget that the last parliamentary election in South Africa, the ruling party, ANC, lost in some of its major strongholds. So the same thing has now happened in Angola. It tells you clearly that it is not about how long we have suffered with you. It is about how long are you going to make our lives better? How long are you ready to change, the status quo? Because the essence of the government is for the betterment of the people. And I believe strongly that if the ruling party continues on that old path and the people are poorer for it, it is not impossible that the people will look the other way, because the only permanent thing in life is change. And if you refuse to move with change, you'll be swept aside.
The only permanent thing in life is change, so says Nelson Ekujimi. Frank, what are your thoughts on the strength of the opposition in Angola?
Well, as Nelson said, it is true that the MPLA has a very strong hold within the country. They have the way they penetrate into society is enormous. It's really big. However, at the same time, Angola has a bulk of young men and women. I think 2/3 of the Angola population is 25 or below that. And this generation didn't experience the war, so they do not see MPLA as a movement that liberated them from the colonialists. So in this particular segment of society, which, well, will become bigger, they really are waiting for services and good to be provided. They're waiting for jobs, they're waiting for education and healthcare. And it is true, if the MPLA doesn't provide this to these young men and women especially, which is what the biggest section of the population, they will turn to the opposition party. And I do believe that the MPLA also realizes this. They know that they know the time is ticking, that if change doesn't come, well, population will switch sides.
All right, let me quickly ask you this question before I let you go. What are your expectations from this new administration?
Well, I followed Lorenzo's rallies, and he says he's going to fight corruption, he's going to fight impunity, and he says that his main goal is to diversify the economy. So rather than, let's say, saying, well, I'm sure he will not provide his services or achieve his goals, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I say, you know what, he said this, he sounds convinced, so this is what I hope to what he does, actually.
So in a nutshell, you believe that this government really has a lot for the people at stake here?
I believe the intention is there. The intention is there, but my problem is, of course, well, is he capable of doing the job? Does he has enough, let's say, support within the party, for example, to really come with policies that transform, let's say, the economy to the benefit of the public? So that's my main concern. I think the intention is there. My concern is, well, the capacity to do it.
All right, thanks a lot, Frank. We'd like to thank you, Antonio Frank, lecturer in Leiden University in the Netherlands. We appreciate your analysis on the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Right now, Nelson, let's wrap up the show with you. From what he said now, huge expectations from this new government. Do you share the same sentiments, or is there something else you'd like to proffer?
Well, like every other human being, I want to share in that optimism that Frank has shared, that look, the expectations on the shoulders of the incoming government is huge. And, you know, he also made mention of the fact that his cardinal programs are fighting corruption, impunity, as well as diversification of the economy. And that is the only way to go if he wants to write his name in gold, because it behoves on him now to ensure that he populates his cabinet with persons of like minds and try to sell that policy to his party, such that for them to, the next coming elections, you know, it will be a roller coaster. So it behoves on him to realize that, look, Angolan economy cannot remain solely dependent on the crude oil. Today, the price of crude oil is down, and most oil-producing countries are the losing end. So it behoves on him, on the new government, to realize that diversification of the economy, making sure that the local productive capacity is, you know, increased dramatically, is the way to go. That will go a long way in ensuring that the mass unemployment in Angola is reduced, that the poverty is also reduced, and it will also bring down the cost of goods and services, you know, which has allowed inflation to peak at about 40%. So by and large, he has this responsibility, and the ball is in his hands. It now depends on him. But we must also admonish the people of Angola that at all times they must keep watch over the government, because, like we always say, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So to make Angola better for each and every one of them is in the hands of not only the government, but also the governed.
Indeed. I'd like to thank you very much, Nelson Okudjumi, election observer and political analyst, for your contributions on the program.
Thank you very much.
In the last 2 decades, democratic process has become a regular feature in African politics, where elections are often free but rarely fair, visibly peaceful but arguably credible. As it stands, the next chapter is clearly unwritten, a new narrative remains undefined, and it will take more than a change in the face of leadership for Angola to unleash unimaginable level of greatness. And that is our package for today. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG. And also follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one, I am Esther Makwariola, and always remember, change starts with you.